Alright everyone, deferred action is set to be repealed by President Trump. My thoughts on this are mixed. However, there's one big thing that I don't think people are pointing out, and that's that if you see this as a problem, the repeal of DACA, that is, it's really Obama's fault because he never bothered to go through the legislature in the first place in order to allow continuing to defer action on people who were here illegally but came as, kids and stuff. It's really his fault because Obama, as an imperial president, said, I can do this via executive action. I don't need any further action. He actually wanted to expand it further and grant blanket amnesty to millions. And in both cases, he was shot down by the court system. They said, no, you can't do that. That's unconstitutional. Rather than attempt to hammer out a deal with the legislature, something that would be binding that couldn't be just gotten rid of by the next president via executive action because it was just executive action in the first place, instead of bothering to take the time to work with people he may not fundamentally agree with, he chose to be morally holier than thou, ignore the legislature that he knew he should have been working with the whole time. He said, well, I don't have the House or the Senate, so fuck me, I guess there's nothing I can do but stroke my pen across this executive order. He creates DACA, he gives millions of people a guarantor. It's upwards of 1.7 million people covered under it, and I'll get into a little bit of the numbers in a moment. He gave them a guarantor. Hey, you've been in this country since you were a little kid. You know the lingo. You're not breaking any laws. You've gone to school. You've entered the military. We're not concerned about you. We don't consider you to be a problem, so don't worry. I'm not forcing you to go anywhere. We're going to defer action on it and tell basically all these other agencies that would be enforcing immigration policy to leave you alone, and you're a dreamer, and it's a good thing. Trump himself, I'll say this first, did allude to being receptive to the idea of keeping skilled, educated individuals within the United States who had come here illegally. He alluded to this, I think it was 2015 CPAC. He came out and said, well, it's a shame our system doesn't work because we've got all this unskilled labor coming in, migrants, and then people come here, they do get an education, and as soon as they graduate, we force them out, and it's a big problem. Now, he wasn't just talking about people under the DREAM Act. He was talking about, in general, a lot of people that are very intelligent, very skilled, do come here under illegal circumstances, often as children. They themselves didn't decide to jump over a fence somewhere. And they get screwed. And our nation gets screwed as well because some of those people are very intelligent indeed. My thoughts on DACA are this. We've conflated two different groups of people who don't really have anything in common based on an arbitrary age threshold. That is, if somebody came here technically illegally, but they're brought here by their parents, whatever, they're unaccompanied minor, and they were like really a little kid, like a toddler or something. They're fully assimilated into U.S. culture. You're almost making them a stateless person by making them leave. They have no connection to their so-called home nation. They never really been there. They don't necessarily even speak the language. They know nothing about it. They've never really resided there. I'm not sure that that's the thing that Trump should be focusing on right now. We've got so many issues that are so much more important than somebody that came here when they were 6 months old. That being said, though, and this is a big aside, there are also those who came here and they were already in their mid-teens or whatever. I'm not so sure that, culturally speaking, that would be any different from an adult coming here. I think that Obama, because of his holier-than-thou beliefs, his belief that, oh, yeah, whatever I do is automatically right because I'm fucking Barack Obama, he decided to extend it to age 16. There's a big difference between somebody who was toted here by their mother on their back when they were 2 months old and somebody who came here when they were already on the edge of 16. They already know their home culture. They've lived there for, most of their life. They've grown up. Their formative years were spent in another country. I'm not so sure that these two groups of people are so easily reconciled. Now, if somebody's willing to fight in the armed forces, you don't need to necessarily give them citizenship, but something should be done with their status. If a person's willing to fight for your nation, it's likely that they have patriotic views and values towards that culture that they're fighting for. That's just, I'm just going to throw that out there that it seems likely to me that that's the case. But Obama's really the one to blame for this. Trump, with a stroke of his pen, can end the whole program. because it was never codified by the legislature. It's an executive action. It's not a law. It's not a bill. It's a memorandum. He says, well, we're going to do this. I'm sending a memorandum out to these federal agencies. Don't enforce immigration policy in respect to X, Y, and Z. And by the way, it's not even clear that it was constitutional in the first place. It's not even clear because the legislature has already set standards on immigration. We've already got bills that cover that. Obama's simply telling him, hey, just ignore it for this class of people. Nobody wanted to stand in his way, though, because it's a rather unpopular idea to force out people who came here as little kids. And I know some people that are on like the far right, they would say, well, even people that were born here, if their parents weren't citizens, shouldn't be allowed to gain automatic citizenship. That's the way we've been doing it, though. As far as people who are, you know, some little kid comes here, they don't know anything about their home culture, wherever it is. And some of these people, the perception, and this goes into perception versus reality. And I'm willing to admit most people think of it this way. Most people perceive of it as, oh, this horde of people that came in from, like, you know, Mexico or Central America. But there are also Eastern Europeans that are taking advantage of this. There are Eastern Europeans, plenty of them, that are in this country illegally. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of them, who have children, who sometimes came when they were children and they're covered under the DREAM Act. Are you going to kick them out too? I wouldn't. I wouldn't bother. If they came here when they were little. You know, through no fault of their own, that their parents brought them here when they were kind of too young to make any decisions themselves. Yeah, I don't care. Look, the likelihood of them causing any problem for the country is fairly low. That's a little bit different than if someone says, oh yeah, I'm 16. And by the way, this ties in with the refugee crisis. What we've seen is that people who are actually in their 20s or 30s claim to be like underage. They get hosted with a home, like they do this in Europe all the time. That's also a problem because you don't necessarily know the age. It's not like you have a birth certificate, you know, you have some destabilized conflict zone. Oh yeah, I lost my papers and got destroyed in a barrel bombing rain. What am I supposed to do? I'm just telling you, yeah, I'm 17. I just look old. I've been in a war zone for the last 5 years. Of course I look older than I am. And they'll believe it. There's no way to verify it. So DACA may end. People who have chosen to fight for this country, or who came here as very small children, they've gone through school here, they're speaking fluent English, they've got no problems, this is their homeland. I'm not sure that that should be Trump's top priority. I think his top priority should be building a border wall so this problem does not emerge in the future. And by the way, here's a looming fact that it's going to be unpopular, I know, to say this. Trump striking down DACA via executive action leads to the same situation that Obama spawned when he didn't go through the legislature. He should have gone through the legislature. Trump should work with the legislature and get something hammered out to replace DACA. That way it's resistant. It's immune to executive actions. Something that prevents future presidents from simply signing an executive order and saying, hey, we're going to let the problem fester because I don't have the balls to deal with it and I'd rather just not work with the legislature right now. That's what we need. That's what Trump should be doing. It's going to be harder. Getting the never-Trumpers on board would be just shy of impossible, but it's something that needs to be done for the sake of our nation. He can't just sit around and issue executive actions that can be overturned the next time the administration changes. It could be in 3 more years. It could be in 7. But regardless, it doesn't really matter now, does it? Because it can be undone by just another executive action anyway. This was just Obama's memorandum out to immigration enforcement. That's all it was. It's an executive policy involving executive bureaus. Trump can change them at a whim. Trump can do just about anything that doesn't blatantly violate the Constitution when it comes to these bureaus. Bureaucracy is one of the biggest problems we've got in this country. We shouldn't even be celebrating the fact that we have a big bureaucracy. They're occasionally helpful, usually divisive, always inefficient. They drain a huge proportion of our tax money away. So what's even the point? So that's my thoughts on DACA. There are things that he could focus on that are more important. The wall is, for immigration, the wall is way more important than dealing with some person who came here when they were 3 years old. I don't feel threatened by that. I do feel threatened, though, by the fact that we apparently lack any border defense at all. Trump's taken the right step by hiring more agents. and getting the base funding, what was it, like 1.6 billion for the basis of the wall, having, you know, sort of options explored in creating it. More needs to be done, and it needs to be done quickly. Nobody's going to ultimately, in the end, they're not going to care if Mexico pays for the wall. They're really not going to care. They'll just chalk it up to, oh, well, he had to negotiate. Yeah, he had to get it built, so he just said, screw it, and we'll pay for it. Who cares? At least it's there. At least then the border's defended. You want to have legal immigration at a higher level, that's just fine. Again, not necessarily a problem, but it's got to be controlled to some degree. There has to be documentation so that you don't get problems like you have in Europe, where largely it's not documented at all. Nobody knows who anybody is. Europe has problems because of its open borders style policy. Essentially, if one nation in Europe doesn't care if you come in, you're privy to every other nation in Europe because of the free movement of people within Europe. That way Merkel can screw her neighbors, which she's trying to do it economically. This is just for her industrial benefit. We don't need to look like Europe. We don't need to emulate Europe. It's a bad idea to emulate Europe. Europe has its own problems. Let's not bring them over here. But yeah, I think I would probably show pity towards somebody who came here when they were a really little kid, and they don't really, there is no other homeland for them. They don't fucking know anything about their so-called home culture. Mexico, well, I haven't been there since I was 1.5 years old. I don't know anything about it. Well, you know, I wouldn't make them a stateless person, would you? I think the diplomatic fallout would be substantial. Trump might, you know, just rescind parts of DACA. He might reform it. He might do what's right, though. Here's what's right. Go through the legislature. Yeah, working with them is a hassle. They love obstruction. They love legalism. They like to insert a bunch of pork barrel riders onto everything. They're screwy. Yeah, we know that. It's difficult to work with a legislative body because they represent so many disparate groups of people and their opinions. But you've got to. Otherwise, you end up like Obama. You implement a policy that your fans really, really like, only to see it shot down later. Just another fucking wedge issue. What's the friggin' point? That's about all. Peace out.